Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are now on the globe. Today, we are presenting this webinar. This is from TESOL International, Native English Speaking Teachers, IS Intersection. Today, I would like to welcome you all today for joining us, and I would like to thank Dr. Anandan for joining us today. He's the speaker with us today. And I would like to welcome all the participants. The session will actually last for 60 minutes, and you will get the recording in a week after the session. Also, please, if you have any questions, just write them in the chat box, and we will address all the questions by the end of the lecture or by the end of the webinar. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Mai Mwafi. I'm a lecturer of linguistics and translation at the Department of English Language, Literature, and Simultaneous Interpretation, Al-Azhar University in Cairo. I'm the chair of NNEST for this year, intersection. And let me please welcome Professor or Dr. Anandan from India. Dr. Anandan, it's my pleasure to introduce you today. He is currently working as a freelance English consultant, rendering services to various institutions and organizations. Dr. Anandan has published several papers on second language pedagogy in peer-reviewed journals such as Journal on Language and Language Teaching, Fortal. He has also authored several books, two of which on second language pedagogy, namely Tuition to Intuition, in 2006, and Freedom from Imperial Shackles, 2016. His book, The Chomskyan Revolution in Linguistics, has won the Kerala Academy Endowment Award in 2006. Moreover, he has published several papers on pedagogy in his blog, Critical Lens. Welcome, Dr. Anandan. Thank you so much for joining us today. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so the title was Decolonizing English, How and Why. I'm just giving an expansion of that, because I'm proposing discourse-oriented pedagogy as a disruptive, futuristic, and transformative model. So probably I would like to put my presentation into two parts. The first part problematizes the non-critical ELT as practiced in my country, I mean India, okay? It is at variance with the current assumptions on language and language learning. And this part also shows how ELT as practiced in our country leads the propagation of linguistic imperialism and why this has to be resisted. And the second part, I'll propose discourse-oriented pedagogy as a disruptive, innovative, and transformative pedagogy that is capable of addressing the conceptual and methodological issues of ELT. And believe that this can resist the spread of linguistic imperialism. And that is precisely address decolonizing English how. So let me put some points what I think is the crisis in ELT in our country. The poor quality of English language teaching and learning is a central topic of discussion in quality parameters of education. And people like Janet Reddy knows, Professor Amudlal Khanna know. Even after completing graduation, the students are unable to manage English. They come out with a very defective language apparatus. And the core issue is that the learners do not learn languages, but a baggage of language facts, such as vocabulary, structures, usages, and a large number of question and answers. The focus is on learning about language rather than learning language. Undue importance is given to practicing discrete English sounds presented to the learners, beginning with the, in many states in our country, beginning with the 2-letter words, 3-letter words, 4-letter words, like that. They're applying the phonic method, I believe so. Lessons are delivered just like a postman delivers letters. I mean, the postman has no right to interpret the letter and explain to the recipient. He just delivers it. So the lessons are delivered, the information is just transmitted. The recent pandemic has resulted in the proliferation of digital material on the internet. And these materials also focus on solutions to the textbook exercises. There are hundreds of them on the internet. NCRT solutions, Kerala solutions, Telangana solutions, like that. They focus on the exercises, grammar exercises, vocabulary exercises, and so on. Now, these issues are quite frequently discussed. And people say that the reason for the poor performance of learners in our country is because of some of these factors: lack of exposure in English, poor performance levels of teachers, or crude methods used by teachers, problems posed, I'm sorry for the typographic error, problem posed by materials, etc., and content-based examination. Now, these issues may be genuine, but there are a few core issues that are not discussed frequently. Let us see what these are. So I put as not so widely discussed problems. ELT packages grossly ignore the innate system of the child, which enables her to acquire language. ELT materials and methods assume that the mind of the child is an empty vessel and everything concerning language comes from outside. The packages propose a rigid practice-based program. The present model of language teaching completely ignores discourse-level transaction, thus narrowing itself to the transmission of isolated language items. It's very important to understand that language cannot survive, exist as discrete elements like sounds, letters, words, and sentences. Language can exist only in the form of connected speech, which we call discourses. Anyway, so as I told you, these are the core issues which are not frequently addressed and not addressed properly. And language exists only as discourse. A word or even a sentence in isolation do not exist. They can exist only in the context of a discourse. ELT as practiced in our country can only pave way to the spread of linguistic imperialism. This is my claim. Okay. So why do I say that there is a spread of imperialism, linguistic imperialism in our country? These are the instances. You go to any state in India, you can see these instances. The opening of parallel English medium divisions and English medium schools in government schools. It is there even in Kerala. The mushrooming of English medium schools in the private sector, introducing English from pre-primary classes onwards, interesting agencies such as the British Council for training teachers of English in the country, deploying native speakers of English in schools to teach English. This happened in Kerala some years ago. The clamor for correct pronunciation, the fragmentary and skill-based approach to the teaching of English, as is being done in teacher training institutions, media propaganda on the excellence of private schools as against the poor performance of students in the government schools. So these are all the instances of the spread of linguistic imperialism. Now, I want to quote, Robert Philipson, who identified certain tenets of linguistic imperialism, and these are these. English is best taught monolingually. The ideal teacher of English is a native speaker. The earlier English is taught, the better the results. The more English is taught, the better the results. If other languages are used much, standards of English will drop. So this is taken from Phillips and Robert, 2009, Linguistic Imperialism Continues, Orion Blackswan. Now, what are the consequences of this? The global marketing of English depends on keeping the tenets of linguistic imperialism alive in the minds of people. When these are translated into practice, decisions will have to be taken on several matters, such as what kind of English is to be taught and learned, what the content should be, what methodology is to be used, who should teach, and so on. In addition to these, propaganda mechanisms and agencies would become necessary to ensure that only those products, whether they are the materials, methodology, human resources, that are in tune with these decisions will get space in the international market. This is how only those products that follow the parameters of what is labeled as standard English dominate in the market. Now, instantly, I would like to quote Steven Pinker, who was saying that, it's a myth. The notion of standard English itself is a myth. Now, who decides the standards of English? There is no international academy to decide that. Let us continue the consequences. A situation arises where a single global or centralized package will be projected as what is needed for all the learners and teachers across the world. The much acclaimed communicative English language teaching is essentially global. Eventually, market economy will be able to control the academic domain. I mean, it's never critically examined whether these products will suffice to meet the needs of all learners, all teachers. This, in fact, results in the demolishing of the linguistic and cultural identity of the native speakers of the non-standard varieties of English. The problem will be much more intense in the case of the native speakers of other languages, like people in India, who are compelled to learn the nuances of standard English. This, in true sense, is nothing but linguistic imperialism, which at any cost needs to be resisted. Now, the cases cited here, the instances I quoted earlier, will not pose any problem for non-critical ELT, but it creates problems for critical ELT and have implications for designing teacher empowerment programs. Taking cue from Graham Hall, 1997, these cases can be critically approached by triangulating three themes: ELT and prosperity, linguistic imperialism, and three, the demand for English. Let's flesh out these notions. Wrong expectations are instilled in the minds of learners about the benefits that could be accomplished by acquiring standard English. Consequently, states as well as institutions spend a lot of amount, large quantities of amounts for teaching and learning English. Globally developed products are used wherever there is a situation for teaching and learning English, whether this is in India, China, or Japan. Consequently, the globalization of ELT is welcomed as a natural and inevitable, phase that would contribute to the lives of people by facilitating better international communication. I mean, this is a marketing strategy. In critical ELT, the globalization of ELT is only a mechanism that suppresses the, let me look at that statement here, I'm unable to see that. Yeah, suppresses the thinking and the language variety of the people across the world and helps sustain market economy. The centrally developed CLT does not address the local needs of the local culture. Okay. And finally, there is the demand for English. Now, we don't know whether this demand is genuine or artificially created. So that debate is going on, whether the demand for English across the world, is it genuine or is it artificially created? Non-critical ELT adopts a fragmentary approach to language and proposes the skill-based and linear mode of teaching. It is essentially a political treatment of language. And critical ELT, on the other hand, problematizes the whole context of language teaching and proposes a pedagogy placing it in the socio-political context. Consequently, it demands a shift from the skill-based and fragmentary approach to knowledge-based and holistic approach to language. It was in this backdrop I had developed discourse-oriented pedagogy for the states of Kerala in the year 2007 and in Telangana and Andhra in the year 2011. DOP has been specially designed to address the poor performance standards of our students and thereby resist the spread of linguistic imperialism. Now, when we talk about DOP, that is discourse-oriented pedagogy, we have to understand the change in the perspective on language. When language as a phenomenon becomes the object of inquiry, we have to choose between one of the two belief systems. Human mind is like an empty slate, and everything related to language comes from outside. Man has innate knowledge system, which gets unfolded in a natural linguistic environment. Now, behavioral theorists propagate the first belief system, whereas cognitive theories support the second. Thus, in second language teaching, the principal paradigm shift involves a move away from the postulates of behavioral psychology and structural linguistics toward cognitive and later socio-cognitive psychology and the theory of innateness. Non-critical ELT chooses the first belief system. On the other hand, discourse-oriented pedagogy, as a species of critical ELT, chooses the second. So what DOP is? DOP is not just another method for teaching English or any other nameable language. It's a cover term for various processes and protocols that are subject-specific, theme-specific, and then also learner-specific. Okay. It problematizes all skill-based methods of language teaching and works out a process that targets human mind itself and not the products of mind. DOP has basically to do with facilitating the process of constructing various systems of knowledge, which means knowledge of language, knowledge of core subjects like mathematics, sciences, social sciences, etc. DOP leverages on the innateness of human beings and evolves various means to access this innate tacit knowledge that is unique to human beings. It envisages schooling or learning as a collaborative enterprise of transformative intellectuals who are committed to execute their intellectual and social responsibilities to create a society of free-thinking individuals who would be capable of using language as a powerful tool for creatively intervening in social phenomena. Now, let's have a look at the theoretical postulates of DOP. Some of them come from Chomsky and other second language theories. Language is man's biological system which gets unfolded. Chomsky. Language acquisition is a non-conscious process. Language is acquired not by learning and practicing isolated language facts such as word structures, but by virtue of recurrence of clusters of linguistic expressions. Now, recurrence is the key word. I'll be explaining that after some time. So the recurrence of clusters of linguistic expressions involved in the reception and production of discourses. The prime requisite for acquiring any language is comprehensible input. This is a hypothesis from Krashen, Stephen Krashen. Language is not the totality of the core skills, LSRW, but the inner competence manifest in the performance of these skills. Language acquisition can take place only in a collaborative environment where the child gets ample opportunities to get involved in interpersonal and intrapersonal communication. The only way to acquire a language is to construct or produce oral and written discourses. This is my own hypothesis. So, given DOP, how do you redefine the curricular objectives? DOP necessitates the redefining of curricular objectives in terms of discourses and not in terms of structures and their relevant communication functions. Some of the discourses targeted are conversations, descriptions, rhymes, songs, poems, narratives, diary, letter, notice, and you can have some 19, 20 different genres of discourses. Now, the list of discourses doesn't tell us the level of a discourse, So we need to go for something called discourse gradation. The list does not specify which features of this discourse are to be learned at a certain level. We need to identify the various linguistic levels of the discourse in terms of specific features. For example, a beginner's conversation will only contain an initiation response or a few sequences of these, but at higher levels, the conversation will become more refined both structurally and stylistically. Now, like that, you can think about other discourses. For example, diary writing starts in grade 3. It becomes autobiographical writing in grade 8. So there is a hierarchy of that. So as I mentioned earlier, at all stages of classroom transaction, the prime concern is to make the input comprehensible to the learners. Now, comprehension or making sense of the text is a derivative process that takes place in the mind of the individual learner by virtue of interplay of several factors, such as the context of the discourse, the need to understand the communication expectancy triggered in the learner's mind, familiar words, and so on. The process cannot be replaced by translation, which is not a productive strategy. Now, code mixing is also not very productive. I mean, in code mixing, the syntax of the mother tongue is taken as the base, and some words from English are included within the sentence frame. What is needed is code switching, where the facilitator switches between L1 and L2. The switchover takes place in the domain of discourse, not at the sentence level. Code switching will help the learners understand the message without translation. The narrative is contrived in such a way that the ideas expressed will be generated in the minds of the learners as mental text. Now, let me remove this bar. DOP, a solution to the phonics versus whole language dichotomy. I mean, that debate has been going on for several years, which is better, the phonic method or the whole language approach. And that debate is not yet settled. There are to and fro arguments for phonics approach and also whole language approach. In a recent review article published in Educational Psychology Review 2020, Bowers parades convincing evidence to show that there is little or no evidence that supports the phonic approach. According to Bowers, we should not be satisfied with either systemic phonics or with whole language, but rather teachers and researchers should consider alternative methods for giving them instructions in reading. How do we facilitate reading? One possibility is that reading instruction English should focus more on the role of the meaning place in organizing spelling, maybe via morphology, and that English spelling system makes sense once the interrelation between phonology, morphology, and etymology is considered. Now, DOP seeks to show a way out from the dichotomy of phonics versus whole language. This is done by taking recourse to the recurrent spiraling strategy. I'll explain what this means. The recurrent spiraling strategy is used in DOP. On the one hand, the language input and output of the learners include a variety of discourse genres, such as story, poem, essay, and so on, that are spiraled with the recurrence of the same theme. For example, marginalization. On the other hand, Learners are exposed to recurrence of the same discourse genre, for example, conversation, that deal with the different themes. So when a theme is recurring, the recurrence happens, when different discourse types are spiraled around that theme. Or you can take one discourse model, say, for example, narrative, which can deal with the different themes. So this is the underlined notion of the recurrent spiraling relationship. The recurrent spiraling relationship is maintained at the sentence level, word level, and the letter sound level. So at the discourse level, discourse and theme is there. At the structure and function level, at the sentence level, word and the meaning at the word level, and the grapheme and the phoneme at the sound letter level. It applies everywhere. The same structure can be, used to express different communicative functions, or the same communicative function will be taken up, which can be expressed using different structures. It applies to other lower levels also. Now, discourse level treatment of language puts an end to the phonics versus whole language debate. And DOP envisages a modular mode of classroom transaction. Theme-based interaction, oral narratives, reading, discourse construction, editing are all transaction modules. These are also language modules that can stand independent of their pedagogic purpose. We may define a module as an activity package that leads the construction of an idea or a concept. Although a module can stand independently, it may also be used in conjunction with other modules. At the end of the transition of each of these modules, certain constructs will be developed in the minds of learners. Each of these modules provides space for the learners to work individually and in collaboration with others. DOP also takes care of skills development within the context of experiencing a variety of discourse genres and writing for a variety of purposes and audience. These skills are not taught by isolating them from their use, nor by means of artificially contrived skills lessons. No one can read an alphabetic language without taking into account the connection between sounds and symbols. Several cues are available to learners to help them make predictions about what they are going to read or listen to. Teachers have to, what I wrote there, let me, to help the children know how to use all the available cues. All right. Now, let me try to explain why I believe that DOP is disruptive, transformative, and innovative, and also futuristic. DOP is at variance with the prevailing ELT assumptions related to language, pedagogical postulates, learning outcomes, textbooks, teaching learning strategies, and assessment. Obviously, several dichotomies can be discerned in the context of DOP. Take, for example, the dichotomy of textbooks versus reading materials. The inherent despotism of the textbooks denies space for the individual learner to make choices from a plethora of reading materials that connects her emotionally and ushers her to further explorations of the world outside. Unless we break the unhealthy nexus between textbooks and exams, whatever we say and do camouflaged as quality initiative in education will not change even iota of the system. DOP, as conceived in Anand in 2006 and also 2016, envisions a shift in the textbook paradigm in the sense that grade-wise textbooks will get replaced by stage-wise evolving textbooks, I call them ETBs, that enable the learners to produce a proliferation of various types of oral and written discourses. So how from a reading material, a plethora of products can emerge. Textbooks will disappear and only evolving textbooks or process sheets will remain. These will be developed based on 21st century themes such as global awareness, financial, economic, business and entrepreneurial literacy, environmental literacy, health literacy, civic literacy, cross-culture and heritage literacy, media literacy, and technology literacy. A wide range of flexible and adaptable life and career skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, creativity, and innovation and design thinking will have to be catered to. Yeah. So I'm coming to last one. How much time is remaining? Let me check. Yeah, this time. The dubious claims that ELT schools have been making on standard English need to be problematized, looking at the larger context of several Englishes across the world. Curriculum objectives are to be redefined in terms of discourses, and classroom processes are to be developed, which will help the learners produce language rather than reproduce it. Pedagogic tools are to be designed for ensuring collaborative learning in an inclusive classroom where the expansion of the zone of proximal development of every learner is taken care of. Teachers should know how teacher talk can be used as an effective and authentic listening input for the learners by making it process-specific, learner-specific, and level-specific. We need to evolve exploratory practices that involve like continuous, relevant, and sustainable exploration where teaching becomes a thinking activity. Teachers are to be empowered to work with the learners within a critical perspective, producing understandings of classroom events and their relation to wider society. The joint explorations undertaken by the teacher and the learner hopefully will end the divide between the researcher and the researched, between the central and the local, between possibly different teacher-learner understandings of the classroom. This is extremely important because linguistic imperialism cannot occur within a framework of localized cooperative action. Understanding social practice becomes as important as linguistic theory in the classroom. Teachers and learners become empowered actors, and local, social, political, and cultural contexts are incorporated into the search for understanding within language teaching so that a safe space is created where all students can participate. Yeah. So I just got certain field evidence of DOP. Children in classes 5 to 10 under the Telangana residential institutions, TREIS in India, have been producing anthologies of short stories, poems, and skits since 2013. DOP is incorporated in the English textbooks and handbooks of Telangana and Kerala. DOP is incorporated in the syllabus of B.Ed and D.Ed courses in Telangana. Okay, this is minimal. I think I would wind up my presentation here. I'm giving more space for discussion, if any questions. Okay. So let me exit the screen and then let us talk now. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Anandan.
Yeah, I had a problem with my vocal cord. I don't know whether I was audible enough. Sometimes voice break, anyway.
Yeah. Thank you so much for such illuminating and innovative ideas. And we can open the floor now for the questions. So please, if you have any question, feel free either if you want to write it in the chat box, if you want to unmute yourself and just tell us your question.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead. If you want to use the raise hand option, if you have many questions, whatever you'd like. Okay, I will start. May I ask one question? I will start.
Sure.
Till we have more participants.
Sure.
Okay, based on your experience with this new model in India, have you talked with, or did you get feedback from the students themselves asking about the change of the curriculum? And how do they feel about the new ways and the suggested curriculum that you have?
Yeah, they feel happy and excited because they don't have to memorize the question answers. There's nothing to by heart. So they are free, they can talk freely, and then also they can come out with whatever idea they feel. There is not one question and one correct answer, one question and probable answers. So I have made a shift from the, maybe in the sense that, how do you address the perceptual thinking of learners? You show a picture and ask questions. The only tool available for teacher is to ask questions. Teacher need not explain anything, teach anything, because every explanation that you do blocks the thinking process. So keep on asking questions, whether you're teaching mathematics, science, geography, anything, ask them questions and use supportive pictures and let them perceive the picture. And what they perceive, their perception, you take it out.
Okay.
Keep on asking questions. So perceptual thinking is very important.
Yes.
How do you make use of, how do you make the maximum benefit out of that in all subjects? That's very important. So only pictures are necessary, in fact. And you can lead them to anything. You can make them write stories or descriptions or monac plays. If you are taking a very socially relevant picture, a theme picture, for example, children sleeping on the streets, and you can initiate a discussion on that, and many ideas will be emerging, and which can be channelized into their products. So one text means it's blocking the thinking process learners. You are imposing the text on them. Okay. So how do you provide learner space for the child to think and then interact with the things outside?
Thank you. So we have a question. We have the first question says, how long does English teacher training take? How long?
Normally, training in the full sense of it might take 20 days, not at a stretch. What I did in Telangana was that in the pilot project, initial 5 days training were given, okay, and the teachers will be going back to their classrooms with a module, translation lesson plan, and they will do it. So while they're doing it in the classroom, they face certain problems, certain issues, which they may not have thought about earlier, So after, 1 week tryout sessions in their classroom, these teachers are called back again and another 5 days input is given. You can give training that way, phase manner. So they learn something and see how it is working with students. Okay. And again, you send them back. And after, again, trying out for 2 weeks, you call them back again for the last spell of 5 years. So 15 days of training will be, intensive training will be enough. And the training also you can use, sessions with the students. For example, 1 hour you can have interaction with the students and see how they are constructing language without teaching. It's a difficult job because teachers are used to teaching, explaining things. So it'll be a cultural shock to the teachers if you ask them, okay, stop teaching. If in Telangana you go to a teacher's ask, what did you learn from Dr. Anandan? They will say, stop teaching. This is the message I've been spreading. And ask questions. Ask questions, a number of questions. I'm a linguist only. Remember, I'm a linguist, but I have given training for mathematics teachers who are teaching in +2 level, 10 plus classes. I know nothing about mathematics, but I ask them, okay, I am here. You teach me this topic, what theory you want to teach me. Then I will ask you questions. So by keeping, my questions, they started thinking, okay, we have to revise the plan little bit. This is why I saw, we are approaching the mind itself, not the product of mind. How do you approach the mind?
Yeah. So we have another question. Thank you so much for this. So we have another question from Katie. Could you please elaborate on the concept of evolving textbooks? I have never heard of this, and the process of empowering students to choose their own reading materials.
Exactly. Now, a sample of evolving textbook is given in Telangana textbooks. At least the 3-4 pictures are given, theme-related pictures. Now, this picture with a few questions on that, I will call it an evolving textbook because Nothing is given there. It has to be generated through discussions, asking questions, what they think about the picture, and connect with their experience. So the products will be emerging that. A textbook is a static form, something that is printed and given to everybody. And it has a lot of disadvantages. Suppose the child is not interested to read about flowers. He is interested to read about animals or vehicles. Does he have a choice? Suppose in the classroom you have a number of reading materials which the child can choose from, even at the LKG level, I mean pre-primary level or grade 1 level. They may be looking at the pictures, but then they start picking up that and then read that and tell others what they read. So it's not one textbook, but you can have hundreds of reading materials, where there is a freedom for the learner to choose from. And that book, will be shared with others also. So if, evolving textbook means certain things are given to work on for the mind to respond to, maybe a picture, maybe some questions, maybe a very short reading passage, and you are asking critical questions. So these are all evolving textbooks, because the final product is yet to emerge from the learners. It depends on how they are working on that. So a single evolving textbook can generate, if there are 40 students, 40 different texts can be generated through process. So from the level of learners who are reading from the textbook, you will elevate them to a level of writers of textbooks, writers of children's literature, starting from class 1. So my dream about a grade 1 student will be, he'll be reading at least 120 different titles. Not title means stories. And he'll be writing at least 30 or 40 stories for others. It's a very simple thing. And you don't have to teach anything. You don't have to teach alphabet. You don't teach grammar. These are all misleading. What will you teach in grammar? The way it is done in our country is that they teach about parts of speech. They teach about, definitions. They teach about all things which are only artifacts. Everybody teaches parts of speech, and they teach how many parts of speech are there in English, and children say 8. But then I ask teachers, do you believe in that? What about words like yes and no? Where will you accommodate them? We need more columns, okay? They teach about present tense, past tense, future tense. In fact, there is no future tense in English. So these are facts. And then for the purpose of teaching grammar, you teach that. So by teaching grammar, who is benefited? The publishers are benefited, not the learners. You have to break the assumptions. We are going just like that, for ages we've been going like that, Suppose you have to think differently, then have a program where children will construct formal grammar. If you want to teach a formal grammar, let's take it seriously, not teaching grammar. Give them language body, a corpus of reading passage, and then ask questions so they can reach at generalizations. Grammar is nothing more than generalizations. So ask questions. They can identify different categories. They can identify the constituents. Everything is possible by interpreting the data. That is what grammarians are doing. So let them construct formal grammar. I have given a chapter in Teachers Handbook in Telangana for class 10 teachers, a full chapter on how you can construct knowledge of formal grammar. It's possible. If you want to, you are so keen about teaching grammar, fine. Let them construct grammar. We are talking about constructivism. So what do they construct? Knowledge now. See, the problem in our country is that people equate with information with knowledge. For most of them, information means knowledge, which is different. The textbook contains lots and lots of information. And a good student is one who can memorize all these things. That's a standardized thing in our country. Mm-hmm. Any question you examine, look at that, you can see that this is the situation. And you are not gaining anything. And this situation will continue for ages. I don't trust government structures. January was representing government, I know that.
Okay.
We
have
invest on government systems, but then a new IAS officer comes, he changes the whole thing.
Okay, we have a follow-up question with Katie. Does the evolving textbooks require a well-stocked library on the internet savvy? I'm curious how it plays out in low resource or low digital literacy context.
Sure. There'll be a lot of reading, we make them literature oriented, Children will be reading stories, they'll be producing stories, performing plays, everything is possible. How do you optimize the input and proliferate on the output? Today's situation is just the opposite of that. You increase the number of textbooks be taught. So there is a course book, and then there is a practice book, there is a workbook, and you introduce English from 8th class to 7th, 4th, 5th, even pre-primary. The number of years is increasing, and the quantity of English textbooks also increasing. Now, put it in a different way. Use one page, and how do you proliferate multiple texts from the given text? So the objective of teaching reading should not be to make them understand the passage, but to create multiple text from the given text. And this is the basic principle of evolving textbook. How do you facilitate the production of multiple text? Okay. I mean, it's difficult to understand, but then it is a very simple thing to do. Children without any introduction to English, even rural areas, even LKG children, kindergarten children, can produce a rhyme within 5 minutes. Teacher's job ends with the 3 minutes, and the rest will be the learner's space. They will create their own rhymes in 1 period. And now it is impossible to believe that, because you always focus on what children produce, the output, the product. Mm-hmm. I focus on the mind, the ability of the mind to construct knowledge. So certain cognitive templates are created in the mind, which they'll be using anywhere,
Okay. So another question, thank you so much for answering this. In what ways is the field of discourse analysis relevant or not in learning to use DOP?
Discourse analysis is something different, okay. As I told you, DOP is a package of, different processes and protocols. There are certain procedures to be followed, and of course, certain process also. Process implies cognitive process. Now, discourse analysis, you just analyze the structure of a discourse, identifying, certain features. This can be taken up, but that is not the primary input, Okay. So how do you, I'll give an example, what is the structure of a story, any narrative, for example? You have a sequence of events. So a sequence of events, minimum at least 3 events is enough, or at least 2 events, a beginning event and an end event, okay? Something that happens. And related to each event, there can be a dialogue, who the characters and what they are saying. So a sequence of events and dialogues will be the minimal structure of a narrative. But when you slightly, pitch it up, you can include other features like, evoking sensory perceptions, what the characters can see, smell, around, or the emotions of the characters. And you can, go to higher levels like that. So when you reach at the 8th class or 9th class, you have a system of, narratives with a lot of features in that. Like, there will be a sequence of events, dialogues, sentences invoking sensory perceptions. Then there will be, sometimes figurative expressions, and the characters' feelings, and a conflict, because a play, a novel, everything revolves around a conflict. And there are different ways of constructing a story. So how do you make children construct the story? Now, listening to story is one aspect of that. Now, there are many experts who keep on propagating storytelling. But if you tell a story, it doesn't guarantee that children understand the process of constructing a story. That's different. So creative writing is a craft. You can work it out. It's not necessary that all of them in the future will be story writers. Not necessary. But we are giving them a kind of, thinking process where they can approach everything, write stories about anything, which they have. Sometimes, they may be interested in writing poems. Let them do that. So asking all children to do the same task also is unscientific. I want to write a description of something, or I want to write a story, or I want to sing a song about something. So why should the teacher force me to tell a story every time if I want to sing a song? So the learner's autonomy is a big question. How do you give space for the learner? There is a Polish, doctor called, Janusz Korczak. He was, killed in gas chamber in Nazi regime. He left us 76 years ago, and he was the first person to say that it is a child's right to respect. Today we talk about child's freedom, child's right to education, right to love, right to food. Like that, Korczak was adding, it is a birthright of the child to be respected, by others. So how do we respect the child? Not by prostrating before the child, but by giving a space for the learner every time. And it should begin from the very low age. Suppose a mother wants to buy a cloth for the child. Maybe the child is only 3 months old and still is not standing up, lying on the cradle. So if the mother buys a frock for the girl child, whose choice will be taken care of? It's the mother's choice. Mother thinks, okay, this matches the complexion of my child. I know very well. But does the mother consider the child? Probably not, because mother might think, how can the child communicate to me? How can the child express his likes and dislikes? But the children can communicate through their gazes. You display 12 frogs before the child and see where the gaze falls on. And that is the child's choice. You never test that. You believe that child cannot communicate anything because he has not started speaking language. But there is language, there is thought process, everything. So how do you nurture the child, I am reminded of a person, poet, Khalil Gibran, who said, you love your child, but don't give your thoughts. The child has her own thoughts. So do we love our children? I believe our parents do not love children. They give them food, they give them shelter, but there is no space for the child to think. The child has no role in decision-making at home. So giving a space for the child is important, whether it is in the classroom or even at home. All these things will come under, when we are asking children to produce their own discourses. So discourse analysis is something that, understands the text, what kind of structure it is there, what kind of language it is used. Okay, now we are talking about how you process the discourse and how it make, a kind of cognitive template for them, how the templates are instilled in their minds without teaching. That's the challenge in DOP. And children can do it very easily.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Anandan, for such insightful, actually, presentation and webinar. I think we will get out of this and rethink the way of teaching, and we are going to rethink about our curricula as well, in all over the world, in every state, wherever we are. Everyone will rethink and again consider what he's teaching in his country. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jani, so much for your help, and thank you, Merv, and thank you to all the board and NNEST board. Thank you all for attending, all the participants. Thank you so much for your time and for attending with us today. And I wish you all actually best of luck and happy night.
Okay,
thank
sure.
you so much.
One question, now, can I, I mean, shall I mail these things to you, this paper for you in your mail,
Okay, yeah, if you would like to do so,
yeah, sure,
I'll
share with you. So if you can look at it, right?
Okay, yeah, okay.
So,
And all the
thank you all.
participants will receive the recording. You will receive the recording of the session. Thank you so much for your time and for your effort, and thank you for everything.